Welcome once again to Liberty Reports on Liberty Television. Liberty Global Reports, I'm very sorry. You can also watch us on StarTimes channel 180 and GoTV channel 1110 across Nigeria. And we're also on Free TV channel 775 in Jos Plateau State. On the Strong MI multi-TV decoder, we are watchable across Nigeria and across all of West Africa. As usual, we look at news stories that have been trending this week, but first watch our global newspaper review. The Gulf Today newspaper from the United Arab Emirates yesterday Monday carries a front page picture of residents of Mosul in Iraq fleeing their city as Iraqi government troops liberate the city from the so-called Islamic State terrorists. The picture is entitled "Homeless at Home." The UK Independent newspaper on Monday carries a front page picture of Turkish demonstrators protesting outside the Netherlands embassy in Ankara, Turkey, with the headline, "Netherlands and Turkey intense standoff after Nazism accusation," following a row between Turkish and Dutch authorities. After the Dutch government banned pro-Turkish government rallies in the Netherlands, the relations between the two countries are at an all-time low, following a speech by the Turkish President Erdogan accusing Holland of being Nazi and fascist. This has understandably angered the Dutch, who were occupied and humiliated by the German Nazis during the Second World War. The Washington Post of Monday carries an article worded "Historic Cuts in Trump Budget," in which it is reported that President Donald Trump has announced severe cuts to the US budget that will cut back the federal workforce, particularly in Washington, cutting finance for housing, foreign aid, environmental issues, broadcasting and research. It is reported that these are the most dramatic cuts to the workforce since the Second World War. The Arab Times of Kuwait carries a front page photograph from Chicago in the USA on St. Patrick's Day, an Irish traditional holiday when American Irish people celebrate being Irish, and the Chicago River is dyed green, the colour of the Republic of Ireland flag. The New York Times also carries a front page picture of residents of Mosul in Iraq fleeing as government soldiers attempt to liberate the city from the remaining ISIS terrorists. The British Guardian on Saturday carries an article headlined "Trump is a pathological liar," in which US Senator Bernie Sanders, who was a presidential contender in the election, won by the now President Donald Trump, urges Republicans to join a resistance against Trump in a withering attack of his policies. And that's all from Global Reports newspaper review for this week. Welcome back. This week we have a guest with a familiar face in the studio. That is Saidu Carpenter, an old friend at Liberty, and welcome again, Saidu.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, viewers.
Firstly, we take a look at the British exit from the European Union, which is due to be triggered this week. The British Houses of the Upper House of Parliament approved it, I think, last night, and it's due to be triggered any time now, which will give a 2-year wait until, or 2-year period until Britain withdraws from the European Union. First, let's look at a report from Sky News in UK.
Now, there's growing speculation Theresa May plans to trigger Article 50 early next week. EU leaders in Brussels were told to prepare for formal Brexit negotiations. Sky's political correspondent Darren McCaffrey joins us now from Westminster. So we understand that Tuesday could possibly be the day, Darren.
It could be. I have to say this is all a bit of an educated guess, but there are increasing signs that Article 50 will be triggered next week, with Tuesday the earliest possible day which Theresa May will be able to do that. Now, we are, 260 days since we voted for Brexit, though we are 20 days away from the end of this month, which was the self-imposed deadline that Theresa May set herself to trigger Article 50. But let's be talking through the kind of timetable of events as how they may happen, I suppose, in the next few weeks or so, Gamal. Well, as I say, that deadline was set of March 31st for triggering Article 50. Theresa May is sticking that she will trigger it by the end of the month. That would mean, of course, Britain exiting the European Union by March 31st, 2019, or indeed, clearly, if it's triggered earlier, it will be 2 years from that date. Now, on Monday, the Commons is expected to vote down any remaining Lords amendments to the Brexit process, and in a sense that means then that the Brexit bill gets royal assent. So it's possible she could do it as early as Tuesday, that is trigger Article 50, when she reports to the Commons following last week's EU summit. Now, there are suggestions that Wednesday would appear difficult or unlikely, as it's the day of the Dutch general election, though there's no sense from Downing Street that that would be an obstacle. Meanwhile, as you say, the other 27 member states have said they would discuss the response to Brexit at a meeting which they penciled in provisionally for April 6th. So when you take all these things together, that is, of course, that Tuesday is the first possible date, that we know she has shifted the common statement that was due to happen on Monday to Tuesday, and also the EU leaders seem to be hinting at it happening next week. That is where all the signs are pointing towards, possibly Tuesday, maybe Wednesday of next week. And that, Gamal, does start the process. It starts that irrevocable 2-year process for Britain leaving the European Union. Now, things are pretty unpredictable. That may well change, but
Well, there you have it. Incidentally, Brexit is actually standing for British exit of the European Union. Saidu, what do you think about all this?
Well, it's a lot to think about, but I'd like to start from where the gentleman stopped. He said it's pretty unpredictable. Now, there have been a lot of different timelines for Brexit. But people thought it was going to kick off with, just the people's, feelings and their votes regarding Brexit. Then this came up. It's become a case of should I go or should I stay? And I would like to think, in my own opinion, it's one of the most unscientific things that Great Britain, let me call it that, has ever done in its entire history. Now, since it's that unscientific, let me give you an unscientific example. For instance, I like to look at Britain at this point in time as a woman who has gone around in her heyday and has a lot of children from relationships and affairs. I'm talking in terms of the Commonwealth, right? And she's packed her bags and baggages now. She's living with the EU. And she wants to pitch her tent with Donald Trump and the US, right? So on the other hand, you've got the many inherent risks of, okay, fine, you're going to go have a relationship with a very rich, here I'm talking about the country, a very rich country, a billionaire country, which is heavily indebted and happens to think that at this moment what it actually needs is to look inward, spend less money outward. And you are staking your bet on you're going to leave the comfort of your kids in the Commonwealth and your neighbors, your NATO allies, and all of them, and go pitch your tent with the US.
With Donald Trump.
With Donald Trump. So that's the unscientific way to look at it, because there's with the timeline that they gave for Theresa May's triggering of Brexit and whatever. As of yesterday, the Scottish First Minister, that's
threw a
Nicholas,
spanner in the works, as it
she
were.
threw another spanner in the works. She said they would like to have a democratic and peaceful resolution of whether they want to be in Brexit with Britain or not. Now, this is the closest baggage that Britain has got on her back, and they're shifting the timeline again. So whatever we saw on Sky News by that reporter a while ago could very well have to wait for what is coming from here.
This issue of Brexit is getting quite interesting, and I'd love to spend more time on it, but we have to move ahead. I think it's going to be very interesting in the next few weeks.
It is
to see what happens.
And you also have to look at the balance of trade. Who has more to lose? Is it Britain losing from exiting the EU, or Britain gaining from going with Donald Trump now, who says he wants to keep his money in-house and do everything in-house? If you look at the balance of trade with the EU, you've got Germany in that order, Spain, Germany, France, Spain, and they're all contributing more to the European Union than Britain in terms of direct investment, assets, and employee stock derivatives.
Well,
you understand?
I must admit my view was to remain in the EU, but so many people seem to be looking the other way. Let's move on. This week, or rather last Friday, the Undersecretary, sorry, get his name right, the Undersecretary of the United Nations, the Undersecretary for Humanitarian Affairs, that is Stephen O'Brien, I'm sorry, stated that it looked like we're going to have one of the worst, if not the worst, humanitarian crisis in the world's history since the Second World War. And all that is centered on Africa, on Nigeria northwest, on southern Sudan, on Somalia, and on Yemen, of course, a little bit over the Horn of Africa. But we're talking of between 17 and 20 million people are facing famine. It's a very serious and very tragic event. Watch this. There's a couple of short videos I put on, which you can watch from China Television and Sky TV.
The number of people facing severe hunger worldwide has surpassed 100 million. That's according to the United Nations. It further warns that it will continue to grow if humanitarian aid is not paired with more support for farmers. The latest studies show almost a 30% rise from 80 million people in 2015. The hike is mainly driven by deepening crises in Yemen, South Sudan, Nigeria and Somalia. Humanitarian agencies are now calling for more investment to help avert the situation. If I may take you through the figures, just to remind you of what
kind of numbers we're talking about. In southern Sudan, we're talking of 1 million people facing starvation. In Somalia, we're talking of 3 million people facing starvation. In northeast Nigeria, we're looking at 5 million people facing starvation. And in Yemen, we're looking at 7 million people facing starvation. Saidu, what's your view?
Well, in my opinion, let's start from Nigeria for two reasons. First, I think the Nigerian issue, even a year and a half ago, I said, is the one that you could most avert, right? The moment we started having IDPs in Nigeria, I had thought it would be prudent for the government to go ahead and seek for experts, talk to UNICEF and people like that who are used to handling host refugees, you know, feeding them and relocating them and stuff like that. We do, to a certain point, have the resources, but we did not have the technical know-how. Now, either because of any of these reasons or a combination of all of them, one, somebody who wants to make a name for himself, that he can do it without any help. Two, somebody thinks there's a lot of money to be made by doing it by himself and not getting any experts into it. Three, trying to you know, well, let's just keep it play to the gallery. You know, that's the reason why Nigeria, we could have been taking care of this thing. As of today, I doubt if there still is a timeline for which these IDPs should be resettled back to where they are, because we did not get expert assistance as at when we should have. The moment we had these number of people, we should have done that. Now, the issue of 5 million people in northeastern Nigeria facing famine, because that's about all the voters in Kaduna State, or maybe all the voters in northeastern Nigeria. That's a pretty large figure. Let's leave the Nigerian figure and look at the international agencies' figure. When they come up with these figures, sometimes the narrative is really alarming. 5 million is not a small number. 5 million people are facing apparent death out of starvation, right? I'd like to be more. There's this issue that the government would not like to say, the Nigerian government or the state government would not like to say, no, 5 million people are not going to die. And then, okay, that means you can take care of it yourself. So they leave your problem to you. You understand? But 5 million, the number is pretty generous. They should be more modest.
You think it's over?
No, 5 million is it's exaggerated. When the international agencies go out looking for money, they go out with bloated figures. Now, when you look at other countries, when you're talking of, you had Somalia, right? Somalia has been a basket case for long, and the world has known how it's been dealing with that. They have a drought, right? That is a natural thing that you can't predict. And, well, the world has to work around it. The UN has to work around it. Now, in Yemen, that's another thing that you could avert.
You have proxy wars by the Saudis and various...
You know, that, I mean, they put those people in the shape they are. Those people are not fighting, they are not fighting militants. And it seems in Yemen, you don't have the difference between... it's basically they're bombing the towns and everywhere, you know. It's not like, okay, the militants are concentrated here or the extremists. No, it's the whole town is in shambles.
And when the whole place is in shambles, people can't farm, they can't irrigate, they can't...
Nothing.
They can't plant, they can't irrigate, they can't farm, they can't do anything.
Nothing.
And of course, this has been the problem in northeast Nigeria as well for the last 7, 8, how many years? 5, 7 years?
Yes, but the beautiful thing about that is that northeastern Nigeria is, let's call it, quite large. And the farming community in Nigeria is also vast. including parts that are not even northern Nigeria. And food can be moved to those places. You understand? And those people could relocate. For instance, there was a time when we had like maybe when the issue was like we had 50,000 Nigerians in Niger Republic, and they weren't complaining. The people of Niger Republic were not complaining. We have such neighbors, right? That we have land borders with, right?
And these are people who are ethnically related anyway. And
yes.
borders, if you visit
they're
those
just
areas,
artificial
they're
borders.
artificial borders, really, yes.
You know, but the issue of this, what do you call it? The Yemen or Somalia or whatever. Nobody is going to take anybody from Yemen. Saudi Arabia is not going to take refugees from them. So I mean, they have to remain there. They're locked, boxed, and
the UN said they need something like $4.5 billion to pump into the problem to try and make a solution.
well, 4.5 billion when you look at what is required. When you look at getting the food aid there, getting medical assistance there, it's not just ordinary food as we look at it. There are various classifications. There's medication.
Medical.
Yes,
as well.
there's medical expert help.
Because when you have particularly children on
Yes.
the point of death almost.
Yes, their
can't just give
diet
them
is
food.
different.
It's special.
It's special, you know, and getting it there on speed, getting it there via special purpose vehicles, you know, it could be that much. But I mean, it's the figures, most especially when I look at Nigeria, 5 million people. This is, what month are we in now? March, right?
March. We're talking this problem will be critical by July, they say,
By July.
by their predictions.
Well, I would have to wait to see, Uncle Arthur, if maybe 2 million Nigerians would die by July, but I doubt. Out of the 5 million they mentioned.
Yeah, but then Nigeria has to gear itself up as well. They can't be relying on outside donors and outside
If we
organizations.
had done the necessary and got help earlier, we would not have needed
Yeah.
any money from outside. I maintain that.
Well, I'm afraid we're out of time, but promise to see you same time, same place next week. Thank you, Saidu, for coming on the program.
My pleasure.
And please check out our Facebook page, which is called Liberty Global Reports, where you can see a recording of this show and reports that we've used in the show. On behalf of myself, the studio and production crew here at our Liberty Kaduna studios, have a great week. Bye.